Now that we've understood man and woman mate value, now that we've understood what a dominance hierarchy is, and now that we've understood why women really struggled to compete with men in a dominance hierarchy, we can finally get on to why Deadwood the movie was shite and Deadwood the series was great. In Deadwood the series, all of these things I've just talked about, the nature of men and the nature of women, in Deadwood the series, all of this was portrayed accurately. I'm just going to try and simplify things here. In Deadwood, Deadwood is a town in the US. And it was this place where the tentacles of the government back in the late 1800s hadn't quite reached Deadwood yet. So Deadwood was this sort of lawless town whereby the people ran the town, not the government. The government hadn't yet spread to Deadwood. And so pretty much Deadwood was run by the people, not by a government. Now in Deadwood, I'm just going to simplify this. And I know some people are going to say, well, you forgot about this and you forgot about that. I'm just going to simplify it here. There were 4 main dominance hierarchies, let's say, within Deadwood. There were 4 main establishments or 4 main key positions in Deadwood. The first one was the Gem Saloon. The Gem Saloon was basically this pub/brothel. This pub/whorehouse. So this was one of the main establishments in Deadwood. And the man, Al Swearingen, who ran the Gem Saloon, Al Swearingen, as you can hear, is a man, was a man. So Al Swearingen was the CEO or the boss of the Gem Saloon. The Gem Saloon in Deadwood was a pub/whorehouse. So we have the Gem Saloon. That's one of the key dominance hierarchies in Deadwood. The second one was called the Bella Union. The Bella Union is basically like the Gem Saloon. The Bella Union was a pub, whorehouse and a gambling saloon, basically. And it was run by a man called Cy Tolliver, another man. So we've got the Gem Saloon, pub whorehouse, ran by a man, Al Swearingen. We've got the Bella Union, another whorehouse, pub, gambling saloon, run by another man, Cy Tolliver. So at the top of the Gem Saloon dominance hierarchy, we have Al Swearingen, a man. At the top of the Bella Union dominance hierarchy, we have Cy Tolliver, a man. Makes sense. What's the third key position or establishment in Deadwood? The sheriff, what we could call law and order. Who was the sheriff in Deadwood? Seth Bullock. That's correct. Another man. So we could say the third dominance hierarchy, the law and order dominance hierarchy, had a man sitting at the top of it as sheriff, Seth Bullock. And then the fourth and final key establishment or post, we could say, in Deadwood was what I'm just going to call the Chinese Alley. The Chinese Alley is where there were a whole bunch of, you could say, immigrant Chinese workers. They were working for, you guessed it, a Chinese man called Mr. Wu. So Mr. Wu sat at the top of the Chinese Alley dominance hierarchy. He was the kingpin of the Chinese section of the Deadwood population. He was the boss, the CEO of Chinese Alley. So, Deadwood the series, when you look at Deadwood the series, not the movie, Deadwood the series, you have these 4 key dominance hierarchies within Deadwood. The Gem Saloon, run by Al Swearingen, a man. The Bella Union, run by Cy Tolliver, a man. The Sheriff, who was a man, Seth Bullock. And then finally, Chinese Alley, which was run by Mr. Wu, a man. In Deadwood the series, all the women worked for the men. All the whores worked for Al Swearingen and Cy Tolliver. All the Chinese women would have been working with Mr. Wu. And Sheriff Seth Bullock, he's at the top of law and order. A man. And guess what? His second in command, Charlie Utter. A man. So Deadwood the series, the reason why I really liked Deadwood the series from the get-go was because Deadwood the series was accurately portraying man-woman mate value, man-woman dynamics as it comes to ascending dominance hierarchies. It was super consistent with human nature. Even, let me go a step further. In Deadwood, there was a whole bunch of gold discovered in Deadwood. This is why the government started to take an interest in Deadwood, because Deadwood was very fertile ground for mining gold, which the government wanted to get their hands on. Who do you think was the chief gold prospector? Who was the head of the gold mining operation in Deadwood by the end of the series? Who came in as the chief, the president, the CEO, the boss of the gold mining operation? George Hearst, another man in charge of the gold mining operation. And then better still, Deadwood opens a bank. They open a bank. And I know what you may say. For those of you who have watched Deadwood the series, you're now going to say, oh, but Alma Garrett, she was in charge of the bank. She's a woman. She wasn't in charge of the bank. It was the Jew who was in charge of the bank. What was his name? I've forgotten his name. Let me look it up here. Let me see. Let me have a look at this. Let me get a new. Let's look at this together here and see. Deadwood. Now, I've forgotten what his name was. Gosh, it's just totally left me. Let me see. Where is he? Who is the Jew? Totally has left me. Cast of Deadwood. There's Charlie Utter, Leon Ripley, Showmore. I can't possibly continue. There he is. There's the man, Saul Starr. Get a good look at him, folks. Because this is going to piss all the feminists off and all the women who think they've got the gotcha moment. Take a good look at that face right there. Look at that. That's the actor who played Saul Starr. Let me get my main screen back up. Let's see. Saul Starr. So, for those of you who think, oh, well, Alma Garrett, she was running the bank. No, she wasn't. Saul Starr, who is the sheriff's friend, by the way, Seth Bullock. Saul Starr is a Jew. And he's really good with numbers. Think of him like an accountant, sort of. He was the one who was in charge of all of the numbers with respect to the bank. And so, who really is running the bank? Alma Garrett, she owned all the gold, the gold claim. She inherited the gold from her husband when she died. All she did was inherit the gold. And what she basically did was she effectively donated her gold so that they could start a bank using her gold. She didn't own the bank. She didn't run the bank. She wasn't doing the numbers. She was just the face of the bank. The person who was really running the bank was Saul Starr, a Jew, another man. So, Deadwood the series, whether it's Al Swearingen in the James Saloon, Cy Tolliver in the Bella Union, Seth Bullock as the sheriff, Mr. Wu in charge of Chinese Alley, George Hurst, who came in and took over the gold mining operation, or Saul Starr, who was effectively running the bank, using Alma Garrett's face, because she was the one who owned the gold claim. So folks, Deadwood the series, as far as I was concerned, got their man-woman dynamics spot on. All of the key dominance hierarchies in Deadwood, sitting at the top of all of these dominance hierarchies, were men, as you would expect, for all the reasons that I've laid out. Sitting at the top were the men. Al Swearingen, Cy Tolliver, Seth Bullock, Mr. Wu, George Hurst, Saul Starr, Charlie Utter, all men. And even Langrish, Jack Langrish, he's another guy who comes into the series in season 3. Jack Langrish is a theatre guy. He owns the theatre. Another man telling all the female employees what to do. So Jack Langrish, he comes into season 3. Another man, he owns the theatre in Deadwood. So folks, what am I trying to say here? Why did I like the series? I liked the series because, folks, when I watch a series or a movie, the first thing that I'm looking out for is I'm looking for the movie or the series to accurately portray human nature. I want to see the series accurately portraying how men truly think and act and how women truly think and act. And Deadwood the series was excellent. They did an excellent job. All the men were big, disagreeable, status-seeking, hierarchy-ascending individuals who wanted money, power, influence, status, women. And all the women in the show were pretty much underneath the men. Not in a negative way, but they were underneath the men when it came to ascending dominance hierarchies. Women, you see Deadwood the series, the women were not competing with the men. Fuck me, it's laughable to think about it. If you've watched Deadwood, it is truly laughable. Imagine some chick trying to compete with Al Swearingen. Imagine some chick trying to compete with Cy Tolliver, Seth Bullock, Charlie Utter, Mr. Wu, George Hurst. Not happening. And that's good, because that's consistent with human nature. So that's fine. That's why I liked it. It was very consistent with human nature. And so, when the men and women were interacting throughout Deadwood the series, I could see an accurate portrayal of man-woman dynamics. The women, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a couple of examples, actually. Whenever Jane, Calamity Jane, for those of you who have watched Deadwood, there's a character called Calamity Jane. And she shoots her mouth off a lot. She likes to get drunk. Now, I like her as a character, but she oftentimes gets quite drunk. And sometimes she'll shoot her mouth off. And she'll talk a big game. And frequently throughout the series, when it really came, when the rubber hit the road, and she was getting put face to face with one of the big players, with one of the big disagreeable men. She buckled every time. She got intimidated, she got scared, she went crying for help. Totally accurate. So she talked a big game, Calamity Jane, and then when it was stuck on her, she pissed her pants. As you would expect when you've got a big, strong, disagreeable meal in your face. So Calamity Jane, multiple times throughout the series, something on my lip. Let's get rid of that. All right. Multiple times in the series, she gave it the big one, and then when it really came to her, backing up her words with legitimate action, she pissed her pants, as I would expect. So that was accurate. What else happened? Well, Alma Garrett, the woman who had the gold claim in Deadwood, who opened the bank that Saul Starr was running, Alma Garrett gets threatened by the big gold miner, George Hurst, who comes into town. George Hurst threatens to kill her if she doesn't give him her gold claim, because he wants all the gold. He's part of the government machinery, you could say. So George Hurst threatens to kill Alma Garrett. And he actually, when she was walking through the thoroughfare, he gets one of his men to take shots at her, to try and intimidate her. What does Alma Garrett do? She goes running to a man for help. She goes to the gem saloon for Al Swearengen's help. She goes to Al, looking for Al to solve the problem. Again, accurate. That's what I would expect a woman to do. I wouldn't expect a woman to pick out her gun and return fire. That's inconsistent. That wouldn't make sense to me. What did she do? She got all emotional. She got all woozy. She started to stumble over herself. She goes into the gem saloon and she basically looks for Al Swearengen's protection and help. Consistent. She looks for Seth Bullock's, the sheriff's, protection and help. She's looking for a man to help her, in other words. That's accurate. That's what I would expect if a woman gets intimidated. I would expect her to go running to a man for protection and help. So we have Calamity Jane. Calamity Jane frequently shoots her mouth off, talks a big game, and then when a man sticks it on her, her arse falls out of her trousers and she goes away sobbing and crying and scared. Accurate. Alma Garrett, whenever she gets threatened by George Hurst that he's going to kill her and he starts firing shots at her, she goes running to the men. She goes running to Al Swearengen. She goes running to Seth Bullock. Accurate. Another example, Trixie, one of the whores from the Gem Saloon. She sees what George Hurst is doing. George Hurst, think of him like the government. He comes into Deadwood and he basically wants to steal all the gold. He's a gold miner. So he comes in, he wants to steal all the gold. And Trixie, who is one of the whores at the Gem Saloon, and she was a former romantic interest of Al Swearengen, she attempts to go and kill George Hurst. She goes up to his room in the hotel and tries to shoot him dead. But of course, she misses the mark. She shoots him in the shoulder. And George Hurst, instead of dying, he survives. And what does Trixie do? When Trixie realizes that she didn't successfully kill George Hurst, who does she go running to? Saul Starr, the man who runs the bank. And who does she ultimately end up in the protection of? You guessed it, Al Swearengen in the Gem Saloon. Exactly what I would expect a woman to do. Woman, emotions clouding her judgment. It's just beautiful. You know, George Hurst, he's basically the government. If you kill George Hurst, no matter how much you hate what George Hurst is doing, he's stealing all the gold and he's basically trying to, ruin Deadwood as everybody knew it. He's destroying the fabric of Deadwood, stealing all the gold and bringing the government in. So you may not like George Hurst, but you know, Trixie doesn't really realise that by killing George Hurst, that's going to bring an even bigger problem to Deadwood's doorstep. Because if you kill someone as high and mighty as George Hurst, as high as George Hurst is on the dominance hierarchy, that will draw the attention of the government. And now Deadwood is all but cooked. I mean, it's basically cooked at that stage. If you kill George Hurst, assassinate him, that is definitely going to draw the attention of the government. And the government is going to basically say, this is a totally lawless, reckless place. We can't allow this to continue. We're going to send in the rest of the troops. We're going to capture Deadwood. And whatever hope Deadwood had of surviving, or at least delaying the arrival of the government, that all goes down the toilet if Trixie successfully kills George Hurst. And all the men know this. This is why Seth Bullock, the sheriff, doesn't kill George Hurst, even though he wants to. This is why Cy Tolliver doesn't do it. This is why Al Swearingen doesn't do it. This is why Charlie Utter doesn't do it. This is why Mr. Wu doesn't do it. All the men know this. All the men hate George Hurst. Because George Hurst basically represents the government. He's coming in to basically destroy Deadwood and steal all of Deadwood's resources in the form of gold. So all the men know this, that he's a piece of shit. But the men also know that if they kill him, that's probably going to expedite the end of Deadwood. The government will be like a fly on shite on them if they kill someone as high profile and prominent as George Hurst. So the men are sort of playing this game whereby they don't want to kill Hurst, but they're trying to figure out a solution to his presence in Deadwood. What does Trixie do, the whore? Emotions cloud the judgment. She sees all this and says, I can't take any more of this. I'm going to go up and kill George Hurst. Emotions clouding judgment. So she goes completely against the plan. She goes completely against what the men want to actually do. She goes up, tries to kill him, botches the job. She doesn't even kill him. She shoots him in the shoulder. And of course, realizing the error of her ways, what does she do? She starts to sob and cry and get all emotional, and she runs to a man for help. That sounds about right. Emotions clouding judgment, and then when she fucks up, she goes running to a man to try and salvage the situation. Perfectly accurate. Beautiful. And I could keep going. I could keep going with examples. The point is, in Deadwood, all of the dynamics, in Deadwood the series, all of the dynamics between the men and the women are spot on. The women are basically servants to the men. Now, you may not like that, but folks, reality is, that is how man-woman dynamics are set up. Men are set up to climb dominance hierarchies without any other care for anything else. That's what they're designed to do. Men are designed to get to the top of dominance hierarchies because it's a critical part of their sexual display, like we talked about in part 1. They need to acquire a whole bunch of resources, defend them, and then give the woman the signal that they're going to funnel those resources her way. It's integral that men are acquiring resources and ascending dominance hierarchies to acquire more status. So Deadwood the series has all of this stuff that we've talked about bang on. The men are in charge, basically, and the women work for the men, and the women listen to the men. And when the women get into trouble, they go to the men. And the men solve all the problems. The women listen to the men. The women obey the men. Everybody gets along just fine. So Deadwood the series had all of this stuff pretty much bang on. That's why it got an 8 out of 10, from my perspective. But what happened to the movie? Why does the movie get a 2 out of 10? And again, the only reason I give Deadwood the movie a 2 out of 10 is because the acting was still good. The actors did a good job. There was nothing wrong with the quality of acting. So I'm being generous. It really honestly was a 1 out of 10, but I'm going to be generous and give it a 2 out of 10 because, the actors acted well. It wasn't the fault of the quality of acting. So why did the movie score 2 out of 10? Well, you could almost guess why, folks. What do you think happened here, if we had to guess? Deadwood the series was written and released 2004 to 2006. That's when the series was made and released. 2004 to 2006. Deadwood the movie comes out in 2019. And remember, folks, 2019 is a different time, isn't it? In 2019, you've got trans rights and LGBTQ rights, and you've got equality, you've got feminism. Women should have equal rights to all the things that men have access to. There should be more women CEOs. There should be more women in positions of power. Men are evil. It's all about women. Boss ladies. Boss ladies. 2019, we have found ourselves in the middle of woke culture, whereby women can do everything that men can do. And not only can they do everything that men do, but they're better than men. Men are just these horrible, narcissistic, evil people. It's all about women. And you know what? You should cut your schlong off if you're a man. That's what you should do. Men are so evil. They're so evil, folks, that you should cut your schlong off and become a woman if you're a man. Good idea, that. Make sure and get the hormone medication into you to suppress your testosterone. Grow a pair of tits. Why not? Get them, surgically implanted onto you. That's 2019, folks. We're heading right into the middle of the woke nonsense. In particular, this idea of women having equal rights to men, and even though women aren't, as capable at doing certain things as men are, they should still get paid the same amount. They should have access to the same positions of power. And so what happens? By the time we get to 2019, dominance hierarchies look a little funny, don't they? We've got a whole bunch of women at the top of dominance hierarchies. Do you think those women are there organically? Do you think those women earnestly and honestly outcompeted the men to find themselves at the top of political dominance hierarchies, to find themselves at the top of business dominance hierarchies as CEOs? Do you think these women actually outcompeted men? Fuck me, folks. They were planted there, in all probability. Other men planted women at the top of dominance hierarchies. Oh, I wonder why they would do that. Why would it be a good idea, if you're a man, to get some female politician in control of a country? Why would that be a good idea? Let's speculate here. Well, you see, if you have some female politician as prime minister or president, that means the men can sit in the shadows, control and manipulate the women, get the women to do the dirty work for the men, and the men don't have to show their face. It's wonderful. Perfect little strategy. It's much harder to control a man who becomes president or prime minister. Just look at the Donald. How easy is it to control the Donald? It's not very easy, for reasons that we've talked about before. Because the Donald is a big, disagreeable narcissist who wants a whole bunch of status and resources, and he wants to find himself all alone at the top of the dominance hierarchies that he's involved in, political and business. It's much harder to control a big, disagreeable schmuck like Donald Trump. But if you can take a few women that are emotionally unstable, more agreeable, weaker than men physically, and have all the hormonal crap that goes along with being a woman, if you can stick one of them in to a political position of power, then you, as a man, you're able to control that person a heck of a lot easier than if it was another man. That's why whenever I see female politicians, I think to myself, Lord Jesus, very organic that. I'm sure that woman earnestly fought her way to the top of that dominance hierarchy. Considering everything that we've talked about on this show, folks, I'm sure that you are sold on the notion that all those female politicians and all those female CEOs, they just, beat off all the male competition, didn't they? Because they're just so wonderful. Yeah. Okay. That's what we call woke culture. This idea that women can be men and women can be better than men, all the things that men have been great at throughout human natural history. No, that's all a lie. Women are actually just as good, if not better. And so as a result, we should have equal rights. And there should be more women CEOs. There should be more women in business. There should be more women here, there, and everywhere. Fuck men, they're evil. Okay, so that's 2019, basically. 2019 is the age of wokeness, whereby we've got a whole bunch of women at the top of dominance hierarchies, artificially. They have been artificially planted there by other men so that those other men have an easier time controlling them. Because if it was just an open marketplace, the women would be probably nowhere near these positions of power, and you would have a whole bunch of disagreeable males in there, looking out for their own interests. And you see, big disagreeable, status-seeking, hierarchy-ascending males are a lot more difficult to control. Much easier just to get a woman in there. And you can intimidate the woman, you can deceive the woman, you can basically play on her emotionality. Much easier to get a woman in there because it's much easier to control a woman and to manipulate her. So that's 2019, folks. That's the age of 2019. When was Deadwood the movie released? What? When was it released? That's right, 2019. So Deadwood the series, which I really liked, was released 2004 to 2006. There was still some sanity in the world when it came to man-woman dynamics. There was still some sanity. There was still some honesty in the portrayal of man-woman dynamics back in the early 2000s. By the time we reach 2019, I'm afraid all logic and sanity has fallen out of everyone's back end. There isn't really much logic or sanity anymore. And unfortunately, folks, Deadwood the movie, as you can probably imagine, is full of a whole bunch of woke nonsense. Let me explain. Let's just go through. I've given you a very quick breakdown of Deadwood the series and why I liked it. Remember I talked about all of the different dominance hierarchies within Deadwood, all the different establishments, the Gem Saloon, the Bella Union, the Sheriff for Law and Order, Chinese Alley, George Hurst running the gold mining operation, Saul Starr running the bank. Men, everywhere, as you would expect. And all the women are working under the men, as you would expect, doing different things, rearing the children, looking after the children at home, teaching in the school, working as whores in the whorehouses, as you would expect for the late 1800s. That would make sense. But Lord Jesus, we get to Deadwood the movie, and wait till you get a load of this. Al Swearingen, one of the main characters in the show, who is at the top of the dominance hierarchy of the Gem Saloon. Badass Al. Al, in Deadwood the movie, is dying of liver disease. Even though in real life, because Al Swearingen, Deadwood was actually a real place. These were actually real people back in the 1800s. In real life, Al Swearingen does not die of liver disease. He moves out of Deadwood and goes somewhere else as soon as the government comes in, as you would expect. But oh no, in the movie, Al Swearingen is dying of liver disease. So one of our big alphas has now been struck down by liver disease, even though it's historically completely inaccurate. And what happens? That's right. Who is going to inherit the Gem Saloon business? One of the key establishments in Deadwood? Who's going to inherit it and become a boss? That's right, Trixie. Remember Trixie, the one I was describing, tried to shoot George Hurst? And she botched the job, and then she started to cry, and she ran to Saul Starr and Al Swearingen for protection. Remember that gal? Yeah, she's now in charge of the Gem Saloon. So there we have our first boss lady, as I like to call them. I'm always on the lookout, folks. When I watch a TV series or a movie, I'm always on the lookout for boss ladies, because boss ladies do not exist in reality. That is part of woke nonsense. So we have our first boss lady. Trixie's now at the top of the Gem Saloon dominance hierarchy in Deadwood the movie. That's the first red flag. What's the second red flag? Remember I told you about the Bella Union? Another key establishment, dominance hierarchy in Deadwood. Remember the Bella Union was run by Cy Tolliver, another big alpha male? Yeah, well, in Deadwood the movie, guess who's running the Bella Union? That's right. Another woman. What the fuck's her name? I've forgotten her name too. Hold on, do I think, if I can get this name, without looking it up. What is her name? Hold on, I'm going to have to look this up. I can't be having that. Let's see. There's old Saul Starr on the screen. Let's have a look and see. Where is she? I'll know her face as soon as I see her. Alma Garrett, E.B. Farnham, Joni Stubbs. Taking another blank. Here she is. Here's the new CEO up on screen of the Bella Union. That looks like a CEO there, doesn't it, folks? That looks like a highly testosteronized alpha male. Yeah. She looks like she would be better placed on the catwalk or on a beauty pageant. But no, she's in charge of the Bella Union. Let me get the main screen back up here, because I'm having great fun, actually. I'm glad I forgot her name. I'm glad I forgot her name, because I could put her face up on the screen. Joni Stubbs. So we did have Cy Tolliver. He was the big alpha in charge of Bella Union in Deadwood the series. But you see in the movie, Cy's no longer in charge. And you know who's in charge? One of his former whores, Joni Stubbs. Second boss lady. You can already see, isn't this great, folks? Deadwood the movie is really consistent, isn't it? With man-woman mate value, man-woman interactions, man-woman dynamics. So far, we've got two boss ladies. Wonderful stuff. We've got Trixie is going to be the boss lady of the Gem Saloon, and we've got Joni Stubbs, who's going to be the boss lady of the Bella Union. Wonderful. Great stuff. We have a few more boss ladies, believe it or not. Remember old Alma Garrett? She was the one in Deadwood the series who had the gold claim, and she was using her gold claim to open the bank that Saul Starr was running. Remember her? Alma Garrett is the one who, when she was threatened by George Hurst, ran crying to Al Swearingen and to Seth Bullock. She ran crying for the protection of two men. That's Alma Garrett. So Alma Garrett decides to come back to Deadwood for some reason. This didn't even make sense in the movie. Alma Garrett, in the series, she sells her gold claim to George Hurst so that Hurst won't kill her. So she sells the bank, basically. The bank gets done away with. She sells all her gold to George Hurst, basically the government. And so in return, she gets to keep her life. For some reason, she leaves Deadwood. The whole point of her selling the gold claim was so that she could stay in Deadwood. That was the whole point. If she wanted to leave Deadwood, then she would have just taken her gold claim with her. The whole point was she's selling the gold claim to George Hurst because she wants to stay in Deadwood and be alive, keep her life. So for some reason, she sells her gold claim to George Hurst and then leaves Deadwood without her gold. Make that make sense. But anyway, so she leaves Deadwood after selling her gold claim for some reason. And then at the time of the movie, 10 years later, she comes back to Deadwood. And of course, what happens? It's just beautiful, folks. George Hurst comes back as a senator to Deadwood. So he comes back to Deadwood, and what he does is he kills another man, Charlie Utter. You've heard me mention him previously. Sort of the deputy to the sheriff. So George Hurst comes back and kills Charlie Utter. And the reason why George Hurst kills him is because he wants Charlie Utter's land to put up these telegraph poles. Charlie Utter, of course, didn't want to give him his land for some reason. Even though Charlie Utter knew that would be a sort of suicide mission, that was a death sentence. You know, Alma was happy to sell her claim back in the series, but for some reason Charlie, under the counsel of the sheriff, Seth Bullock, wants to, put his stake in the ground, and even though he knows Hurst is going to kill him, which, by the way, is another historical inaccuracy, Charlie Utter doesn't die, just like Al Swearingen. In real life, Charlie Utter doesn't die. He doesn't get killed by George Hurst. He leaves Deadwood, like Al Swearingen. But the movie wanted to make a point. Another man gets killed. Al Swearingen, liver disease, he's going to die. Trixie's going to get the Gem Saloon. Boss lady. Joni Stubbs, she's the boss lady over at the Belly Union. Charlie Utter gets killed by George Hurst because he doesn't want to give up his land. Absolute, logic falling out of his arse. But of course, it's historically inaccurate, so that makes sense. It makes sense that didn't make sense in the movie. But anyway, George Hurst kills Charlie Utter because he wants his land. Now, what ends up happening is there's basically an auction that takes place in Deadwood. And George Hurst is a senator in the US government. He's extremely powerful, influential, rich and wealthy. And the movie tries to convince us that at this auction, whereby Charlie Utter's land is now up for auctioning, because of course Hurst hired a couple of mercenaries to kill Charlie Utter, so it didn't look like him, his hands were clean, but now that Charlie Utter's dead and his land is up for grabs, it goes to auction. And so what you would expect to happen is, you would expect the extremely powerful, influential, rich George Hurst to be able to outbid anyone for Charlie Utter's land. That's what you would expect. Logic would tell you that should happen. But oh no, we get our third boss lady of the movie. Alma Garrett, for some reason, sells her gold claim to George Hurst in the series. She leaves Deadwood for some reason. The whole point of her selling the gold claim, as I said, was so that she could stay in Deadwood and not be killed. But she sells her gold, leaves Deadwood. She comes back 10 years later for some reason. And even though she sold all her gold, she somehow manages to outbid, basically, the government. So she outbids George Hurst, and Alma Garrett acquires Charlie Utter's land. Again, please make that make sense to me. So George Hurst is basically the government. Powerful, influential, rich. And somehow Alma Garrett, who has come back to Deadwood for some bizarre reason, we don't even know why she left. That's bizarre. And fuck knows why she's coming back. She outbids the government. But she's a boss lady. Remember, it's 2019. So that's the third boss lady. We have this beautiful scene in the Gem Saloon. That's where the auction takes place. While the alpha is dying of liver disease upstairs, Al Swearingen. Yeah. So in the Gem Saloon, we have this auction. And Al McGarrett, a woman, oh yeah, woman, she outbids the government. Yeah. That's our third boss lady. Because, you know, the movie really loved showing this scene. It loved showing George Hurst, big alpha man. They really loved showing him getting outdone by a woman. They just loved that. They had to show us that. That's our third boss lady. We've got a fourth boss lady. Lord Jesus, it's a miracle. Remember I was talking about Calamity Jane? Calamity Jane was this character who talked a good game in the series, and then whenever she was actually confronted by a man, she pissed her pants. Went away scared, running for help. But you see, by the time we get to Deadwood the movie, she's a different woman. A different woman altogether. Maybe she got a transgender surgery back in the late 1800s. Maybe, you know, Doc Cochran in the movie, because there's a doctor in Deadwood. Maybe he had expertise in the late 1800s about how to put a schlong and a pair of nuts onto a woman. Because it seems that Calamity Jane has either got a schlong and a pair of nuts transplanted onto her, or she's grown them in 10 years. Because all of a sudden, Calamity Jane is now a boss lady also. Guess what happens? Harry Manning, Seth Bullock, who is the sheriff, his second in command, Harry Manning, is going to shoot Seth Bullock. So he turns on Seth. Looks like he's going to double cross him. Because, you know, George Hurst is back in town. There's a whole bunch of trouble brewing. And it looks like, for some reason, Harry Manning, who is sort of like the deputy to Seth Bullock, the sheriff, turns on his own sheriff and is about to shoot Seth Bullock. Who saves the day, do you think? Who do you think saves the day? Do you think it was Al Swearingen? Do you think it was Cy Tolliver? Do you think it was Mr. Wu? Do you think it was Seth Bullock himself just snuffs out the trouble? Do you think, oh no, Charlie Utter's dead. That's right, but Jesus, Charlie can't help out. Sure, he's dead. Historically inaccurate, by the way, but he's dead in the movie. Oh well, liberties were taken. No, Calamity Jane must have went through either a transgender surgery to get a schlong and a pair of nuts put onto her, or she grew them, because all of a sudden, she shoots Harry Manning like a boss lady. And you know, she puts the gun back in her holster. Boss lady. So basically, throughout the entire series, Calamity Jane, as you would expect from a woman, as you would expect, talks a big game, and then when it's stuck on her by a man, she cowers in the corner. Makes sense, given everything that we've talked about. But in the movie, oh no, Calamity Jane becomes a boss lady, and she saves Seth Bullock's life, the sheriff, by shooting his deputy who looked like he was going to turn on him. Calamity Jane grew a pair of nuts and a schlong and basically became a man. Oh, totally accurate. Totally accurate with female psychology, you know. Folks, this is why Deadwood the series was great, and it's why Deadwood the movie was shite. Deadwood the movie was shite because what they have done, what the writers and the director and the producers and all the people, what they've basically done is they have injected into the movie all of the woke garbage that's happening in 2019. Even though the movie is set in the late 1800s, we have a bunch of boss ladies walking around in the 18 fucking hundreds. Like nowadays, folks, it's accepted that you've a whole bunch of boss ladies. But we've already talked about that. They aren't really boss ladies. They have been allowed to artificially climb or be inserted into the high peak of a dominance hierarchy so that they can be controlled and manipulated by some other man. So we've got a whole bunch of boss ladies now in 2026 being allowed, may I add, to be a boss lady by some other man. They haven't earnestly and honestly outcompeted the other men. Nope. Some other man or some other group of men are literally weaponizing women, using them, planting them artificially at the top of a dominance hierarchy so that the men can control the women, because it would be easier to control a woman than it would be in comparison to control a man. Okay, so in 2026, even though it's artificial and the dominance hierarchies are being tinkered with artificially in 2026, it's far more commonplace to see boss ladies in 2026 and in 2019 as well. But remember, folks, Deadwood is set in the late 1800s. Fuck me. The concept of, a whole bunch of boss ladies walking and running around, basically in charge of the operation of Deadwood, one-upping all of these alpha males. Folks, this is the reason why Deadwood the movie was shite. Deadwood the movie was shite, from my perspective, because it has done a 180 on man-woman dynamics. The reason why, in all probability, that they've done a 180 is because the movie was released in 2019. 2019, we are in the age of wokeness. And what they have simply done is they have created a whole bunch of boss ladies in the movie. They have literally altered the facts of what happened in Deadwood. They have introduced a whole bunch of historical inaccuracies so that they can have boss ladies shine bright in the movie. And for me, that is why Deadwood, the movie, is shite. I will never watch it again. I will never recommend it. The series is excellent because the series, which was released and created back in 2004 to 2006, it doesn't suffer from this woke garbage. But the movie does. And it's disgusting to look at for me. To watch one of the big alphas, Al Swearingen, die of liver disease. It's not even historically accurate. Al Swearingen, I am going to repeat, does not die of liver disease. Charlie Utter does not get killed by George Hurst. But you see, all of this stuff has to happen so that we can get ourselves to a position in the movie whereby we have boss ladies. If Al Swearingen doesn't die of liver disease, then Trixie doesn't get to be a boss lady. If Charlie Utter doesn't die, then Alma Garrett doesn't get to be a boss lady during the auction when it comes to who's going to acquire Charlie Utter's land, which is now up for sale. Cy Tolliver. Now I understand. The actor who played Cy Tolliver actually died between the series ending and the movie being created. So okay, we can't expect the actor to rise from the dead and play Cy Tolliver. But this idea of putting Joni Stubbs, a whore, in charge of fucking the Belly Union. And here's the funny thing. In Deadwood the series, the same Joni Stubbs tried to open a whorehouse on her own with another woman. In the series, I actually forgot about this one. This is beautiful. In Deadwood the series, Joni Stubbs tries to leave the Belly Union where she's under the control of Cy Tolliver. She tries to leave and start up her own whorehouse. And she fails miserably, as you would expect. Ha! She tries to compete with Cy Tolliver at the Belly Union and with Al Swearingen at the Gem Saloon. Deadwood, the TV series, gets this spot on. It's beautiful. So Joni Stubbs, who in the movie is the boss lady of the Bella Union, she literally, in the TV series, she tries to start up her own whorehouse. And she fails miserably. Miserable failure. And yet here we have her in the movie, boss lady. So you can see, folks, that's just yet another example of why Deadwood the series is bang on. Again, late 1800s, some chick trying to start up a whorehouse, especially when she's in competition with the Bella Union, run by a man, and the Gem Saloon, run by another alpha male. As you would expect, some chick starting from scratch with two of the most important influential establishments, the Bella Union and the Gem Saloon, already firmly established in Deadwood, you would obviously expect Joni Stubbs to have an absolute complete failure. That would be the most likely outcome if you, as a woman, tried to compete against the pre-existing whorehouses which basically run Deadwood. Completely accurate. The series got it spot on. She completely failed. But here we are in the movie. Boss lady. She's now in charge. Not just of her own whorehouse. She's in charge of the Bella Union. One of the biggest establishments in Deadwood. One of the most important dominance hierarchies. Nonsense. So folks, that is the long and short of this. Deadwood the movie is shite because it's full of woke garbage. Specifically, what Deadwood the movie does is it literally starts to manipulate the historical facts of the historical facts of Deadwood and the actual real people who lived in Deadwood. The movie alters the historical facts so that it can create all of these opportunities for boss ladies to rise to the surface. Woke garbage. This idea of Calamity Jane all of a sudden growing a pair of nuts. Nonsense. And that's why I loathe the movie. It's a horrible movie. The actors are great, but the movie, it's horrible. It has done a 180 on man-woman dynamics. And it's so obvious, folks. If you watch the series and then you watch the movie, you will be very confused. Like, it's very confusing to look at. Because even if you don't have an intimate understanding of man-woman dynamics, you can kind of tell, unless you're a feminist, obviously. If you're a feminist and you're, one of these fucking campaigners for equal rights for women, that women should just, independent of how capable they are, women should just have access to the same stuff that men should have access to. If you're one of those people, you'll think the movie was great. You'll think it's, women power, female empowerment. That's what the feminists will say. For anyone who has any ounce, if anybody has a drop of logic, and their logic hasn't fallen out of their arse, thanks to wokeness, anybody with a bit of logic and an understanding of man-woman dynamics will look at Deadwood the movie and come to the logical conclusion, which is, it's shite. It's total. Not only is it historically inaccurate, but the historical inaccuracies have been used to allow women to be boss ladies. They have literally manipulated the facts of what happened in Deadwood so that in the movie, people can see boss ladies running the show. Horrific. Dreadful. Deadwood the series, great stuff. Deadwood the movie, shite.